Hey 7MS friends, as promised, today kicks off a brand new series. 7MS presents the Storytelling University. Now these episodes are going to drop in your feed each month. Think of it this way. If Thursdays are where you listen to the stories I tell, these episodes are where I explore how stories work, where they come from, why they emerge, and how they shape the world that we see. And the best thing is I get to talk with some amazing people about this stuff. Now, to open the series, today I'm joined by Noraly Schoenmaker. Now, she's better known as the YouTube viral sensation Itchy Boots. She goes from being a geologist to a solo world traveler on a motorcycle. This is unbelievable. Wait till you hear this. She's built this global audience by capturing her journey not just on the ride, but the human stories along the way. We talk about storytelling, the kindness of strangers, what got her to get on the bike in the first place, and all of this on the heels of her brand new New York Times bestselling book. The links for all of this is in the description, so make sure and check those out and enjoy the conversation. We were doing the mic check, right? The fact that we couldn't get the exact microphone, I almost went into the fetal position because the sense of control that I have is really important in my work and my storytelling. Now, when I have the control, then I can use my storytelling extemporaneously, but it's within a controlled setting. And here I'm talking to you, and you have traveled on a motorcycle to more places than I can ever imagine. I almost can't believe the courage, the bravery, the guts that it takes for you to do this. And I'm coming from my point of view because I have a hard time driving 45 minutes from my house. So you can imagine how valuable your content, your storytelling is to me as someone who really knows myself. Let's just start this. How the hell do you do it?
I'm addicted. I'm an addict. So
when did that start?
I mean, when I was 18, I turned 18, so I was allowed to go on holiday without my parents. And I booked a flight to Egypt, and I went to Egypt on my own for a trip. I was like, yeah, and I just arrived there and I was like, what am I going to do? Okay, let's, explore. So it's always kind of been there, I think. And even when I was a year before, I was cycling. I cycled from the Netherlands to Belgium, Luxembourg, through Germany. It's not very far, but still, I was 17 years old. So for me, it's always been there. And at some point, or at least I get kind of addicted to that high of the excitement and dangerous countries. So for me, it's very addictive to always have this whoo. So I can't go back anymore to, for example, traveling around Europe for me is now totally boring because I feel like it's close to home. It's not very dangerous. I know how things go there. It doesn't appeal to me anymore because I miss that element of excitement.
So the only thing I can relate to is when my stories on my podcast, which will be featured, are extemporaneous. And I like the thrill. I'm addicted to telling stories because I love, one, the outcome, which is the connectivity to others. Even though it's through a autobiographical lens, they find their own memories only through me. Not because it's not egoic. It's egoic to want to do stuff like this, but the outcome for me is oh, I remember that. I know exactly that feeling. But not exactly, but I know what you're saying. The distance between a story and another soul is very short. It's a great way to, so I'm addicted to that. I'm also addicted to the feeling of, I don't know where it's going to go. I have an idea. Is that something too, where when you travel, let's say you're going to city, you're on the bike, clearly there's the danger of it and relying on others. Do you like sort of improvising as a human being and finding things along the way? Is that thirst for improvisation something that's present? And have you found, I think you have from what you've posted, that more times than not, even though there's the fear of danger, you were surprised with generosity and kindness from strangers in those situations?
Okay, there's a lot in this question because I think first we were talking about storytelling, right? You were talking about storytelling and how much you enjoy that and how you like to take people with you on that story. And for me, it took a really long time before I realized that people enjoy stories. So I done a lot of traveling already in a time that people were already blogging and like doing this type of stuff. And I always thought, but who's going to be interested in my story? Like, I always felt like it's one of those moments where you're on a birthday party and then an aunt comes with her photos from her holiday, you know, and you have to go through like this whole photo album and you're like, I don't care. You know, that's always how I thought people would think about my stories. Like, we don't care what you did in that country. So it took me a really long time before I realized, maybe people do like my stories. So in that sense, I feel like I missed an opportunity because I could have had already 10 years of storytelling experience. But anyway, so that was the first part. And then
thank you for unpacking this, by the way.
Then you were talking about improvising.
Yeah.
And I love not knowing what's going to happen that day. And I don't want to have a strict planning. I want to have things happen that are unexpected. I live for that. So that's definitely, and in some countries or in some places, that's easier than in others. Mm-hmm. So there's just countries where just unexpected things happen all the time. And that's where I'm on my best. You know, that's what I love the most. That you're in the morning, you're like, oh my God, I have no idea what's going to happen today, but I look forward to it. And the third part was about trusting people, generosity.
It's an assumption. I only know this because in the time that I did before I got on the mic, I just have been in my basement for 5 years telling stories to the wall. I did travel domestically for 3 years and I toured monologues. And the one thing I always noticed was, despite the fear, the danger, the stereotype, you know, it's a trope, but it's real, that I found more kindness and more help than I found fear. And it's not that it's not out there. You know, you've been to some dangerous places, but the vast majority of folks I've met, I've been able to count on in some regard as a human being. Have you found that too?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is without a doubt that there's more good than evil in the world. And that's sometimes hard to believe, I think, because, I mean, bad news is always reached the headlines, you know, instead of good news. And that makes sense, you know. I'm not saying that that's, you know, that's weird or anything. But that's how, like, the good stories often get snowed under, and you kind of forget that there's more good people than bad people. And also, I don't know, it's not that I'm statistically educated, but I always think, like, what are the odds that there's somebody hiding in the bushes waiting for a woman alone on a motorcycle to pass? You know, like, surely that's not going to happen. Or if I am in need and I flag down the first person that comes by, what are the odds that this is like a serial killer? Probably very little. So I always think that the odds are with me in that sense.
Who taught you to ride a bike?
Like a bicycle? My parents. Although I have to say, yeah, there's this story that my mom likes to tell, is that my brother is 1 year older than me, and he had a bicycle. I can't remember how old he was. Probably 3 or 4 or something. But I hadn't a bicycle yet because I was too young. And then in like one unguarded moment, my mom looks outside of the window and she sees me passing, you know, in front of the window on my brother's bicycle. Way too short for it. So I was like hopping from like side to side. And then they figured, okay, maybe she also needs a bicycle then.
I think that was some foreshadowing, clearly. You're like,
possibly.
You're flagging your story, like, this is going to transcend really quick. What about for those who don't know or maybe are new to your channel or your stories, when was the first time you got on a motorcycle?
The first time was when I was about mid-20s in El Salvador in Central America. Of all places, but I tried a dirt bike there for just, I don't know, half an hour or something. And then several years passed, and then I thought, maybe I should try this again, you know, do like a try the bike. And yeah, from that moment I was like, okay, this is it. What I've been wasting 28 years of my life with, you know, like, yeah. I'm still sad that I didn't discover it earlier, because if I would have, instead of being 4 years old on a bicycle, if I would have been on a motorbike, I was thinking, like, imagine the riding I could do now, you know?
Your passion for this is palpable. Going back to sort of this I always think is story, and again, it's just an arc or a plot point. It's not the three-dimensional perspective. But can you talk to our audience a little bit about what were some of the thoughts that came into your decision-making process for like, no, I'm going to move from this completely and start this new adventure?
So after I graduated from university, I was on the track to do a PhD. So I did and I was doing a PhD in organic geochemistry. So that's doing, basically it was doing chemistry on rocks to reconstruct climate change in the past. That was kind of the theme. And so I collected the rock samples for that in Australia. And then I thought, okay, I've now studied 5 years at university. There's going to be another 4 years of PhD coming. I'm going to take a little bit of a break in between. So I thought I'm going to travel for 3 months and then go back to the Netherlands and start doing the PhD on those rocks. And in those 3 months, I traveled in India.
Yeah.
And then as I was in India, I was kind of, I wouldn't want to say like that something spiritually happened, but either way, I don't know what happened. Something happened. And I basically thought, I don't want a career in science anymore. I want to travel. So then I sent an email to my professor saying, I ain't coming back. And I didn't. So instead of going back to the Netherlands to do a PhD, I traveled a little bit more, but very quickly ran out of money. And then with my last, I had like €100 left on my bank account. So I booked a flight to Australia from Indonesia and then started working in gold exploration as a geologist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just so you, and I know you started with saying, I don't know who would be interested in my story. I have to check you on that. Like just your transition before the sort of viral blow up of you like looking at climate change in the past through rocks, then going to India, and then from a guy from 20 minutes south of Cleveland, then you're in Australia, there's gold. This is a damn adventure novel, Noraly. This is like freaking Robinson Crusoe. This is unbelievable. I just need to affirm as a fellow storyteller and someone we've never met before, I can't tell you how exciting and you're doing what you love, but this is so valuable for so many people who maybe want to live vicariously, don't have the opportunity, or maybe are just in a time and season in their life where they just want to be that's a gift to share with people. And it's doing something that you love. But I know for me, it's like, wow, it's the same kind of gift one gets when they read an adventure novel where they're with you. And then you've now constructed this inroad visually with on the motorcycle, and you have the rigs and everything set up. Like when you start documenting, I know it built over time, but could you have imagined it would be this level of production? And how are you holding up with that?
Okay, so I'm going to break this down again for you.
Please.
Okay, so I think the first thing I want to say, because in the beginning, you also said something about how you think what I'm doing is so brave, and you know that is for you a very different story to do traveling.
You're going to be humble here, aren't you? You're going to be like, it's not that brave. I have a feeling.
Totally humble. It's no, but the point I want to make is like, obviously, I am not going through life thinking, oh my God, I am so brave every single day, because my normal is very different. And that what's for me normal has been just building up over all those years. So like all those little things that I did from going to Egypt on my own when I was 18 has just been like building up to this. So now when I ride a motorcycle through Iraq or Iran, of course there's excitement, but I think for me that's already a lot more normal, because I'm just like, if I've done this, then I can also do this.
You've been building on that story since you hijacked your brother's bike.
Exactly. Kind of, yeah. So and that's kind of the same as for the documenting. I've also been building on that. So I started with one GoPro and horrible storytelling and horrible filming, horrible audio, and now I'm more than 700. I don't even know. 700.
It's a lot of subscribers.
A lot. No, I mean episodes. So like I'm 700 episodes later, over time I slowly increased another camera, introduced a drone, so it's not that in overnight, suddenly I was like, oh, I know how to do storytelling and how to create a good episode. I started off horribly and just started building onto that to what it is now. And it's still, yeah, it's still not great, but same like you said, you don't understand why people are listening to you. I don't understand why they're watching my videos. For me, I'm like, yeah, it could be better still.
Well, it's an inroad. It reminds me, and this is not, you may not, there was a movie in America called The Blair Witch Project, and I'm not trying to.
I know it.
So you know it, right? So there was not the scary horror quality, because I don't like scary films. I get scared and I have nightmares. But what I loved about it, and everyone did, was it was the first sort of like documentary / fiction, right? It takes you right there. And I think right. Look, there's people who are blogging but there's something about the insight to your travels and all the angles. They're with you, and so yes, you've leveled up production wise, which is amazing, but there's also the fact that I think you are aware that it is actually just something you would do whether you were documenting or not. That's what I think translates. It's not like, oh, I mean, this is my assumption when I hear, when you check in with your audience, you're just doing it, and it's almost like a journalist where you're just kind of going, here, look, just look. You feel like you're right there. So that's the feeling that I get when I watch that. But you look at statistically too, when you go, why? I mean, 60 different countries, 5 different motorcycles. And if anybody hasn't done this, I know a lot of people track you on YouTube and social, but if you go to itchyboots.com, one of my favorite features there is the route tab. And speaking of storytelling lovers that listen to my show, just go to that tab. You have a damn story for every bike. You're building a storytelling universe. We're not that much different, besides the fact that you're brave and listen, Noraly, I've worn this same button up every time I recorded, just because the level of comfort I feel, I don't think I can change it. So like, what I love though is...
No, but I can relate to that. I feel the same. When I put my helmet on, and my head is like nice and tight in the helmet, I'm having all my gear on, I feel like, okay, I'm ready to face the day.
Okay.
So there are also parts of like tiny little bits of routine and comfort that help me, because everything else is uncertain, right? I have no idea about everything else. So I do the little things that I can kind of make myself comfortable with, that I can do, I will do.
You mentioned a couple, but do you have a daily, you mentioned the helmet, that gets you ready for the day, that make you feel, I guess, secure? Is it secure or prepared, maybe is a better word?
No, it's secure. Okay. It's secure. Like, it gives me a very secured feeling, and not in the sense of like, oh, if I have an accident, I'll be not like that. And the same goes for naming a motorcycle. And like, that motorcycle and the gear that I'm wearing is the only constant factor in this journey. The rest is all changing. I'm sleeping somewhere different every night. I'm meeting different people every day, never riding the same road twice. So the only thing that remains the same is my motorcycle and my gear. So when I dress up in the morning and I put my gear on, I always feel secure and kind of safe. And then seeing my motorbike makes me happy. It's the same motorbike, so this motorbike. And that's your partner, right? That's the one that's going to take you across the world. It's not going to be a different motorcycle every day. No, it's the same one. It's your bike. And just having that, and then getting on the bike, and then I probably have too much luggage with me, but you're kind of squeezed in between the tank and the luggage behind, and I feel secure. I'm like, okay, whatever happens today, I can face it.
Where are you right now? Where are you beaming in from right now? Are you in the Netherlands right now, or are you somewhere in between the world?
Yeah, so I'm now in Europe, because I'm taking a small break from my ride to Japan for a book tour in the UK. So my bike is still there, and Frankie's waiting for me. And so when I finish with the book tour, then I'm back to the road to Japan.
Okay, so which is amazing. And you have, what is it, just a couple days ago that you had the release, correct, of is it the English translated version of this?
Today. It's today.
It's today.
Yes.
It's almost as if this was serendipitous. That's amazing. Well, So tell me about one, just how you're feeling about that. I'm sure it's a labor of love as well as a labor of labor. How do you feel about the release, and what do you hope people can take from that? Maybe not differently, but as another universe of story to what you've already built.
Yeah, I'm extremely happy that my book is being translated into English, of course, because, well, of course, now I can reach a lot more people with my story, but also, I mean, for a Dutch author to be published in the US is almost impossible. And the only way why it works, I mean, it's not that I'm flattering myself. It's not because my book is so amazing, but also because of that.
It
No,
is.
but it's because no, it's not. But it's of course because I already have a big audience in the US, you know, that know about Itchy Boots. So that really helped to, you know, get the publisher on board with this. So I'm really happy that, you know, through my video making, I now also get to make another dream come true, which is becoming an author, becoming a published author. So it's a really big thing. And yeah, I hope that you know, people will love my book as much in the US as some people in the Netherlands that already read it.
You know, when I think about the different vectors, or if you will, different ways in which you can tell a story. You know, I always talk about, and I teach storytelling, I shouldn't even say teach storytelling, I teach story catching, which is what you did, which is this sort of a priori experience prior to the expression of what the story is. So for me, I haven't written a word of any stories. I just tell them extemporaneously. So I don't write a single thing. I just turn on the mic, I put a timer on, and I go, let me tell you a story about how I talked to Noraly and I realized that I wasn't as strong as I thought I was. So it's like, and I just boom, 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 boom. And so you have that, and then you have writers, right? And then you have what you do, documentarians, and you combine adventure in life with all of that. And I could go on and on and on. The expression of a story comes after the catching of the story, right? There's this actually non-expressive catching, and how we comprehend them, how we navigate them, how we witness them, and then how we organize them and then express them. And then I realized too, as I grew my show, that I primarily was an audio base. And the thing is, because I love audio, I love the freedom of moving around and having my imagination turned on rather than being stuck to a screen. That's not to take away videos, great, but for me, that's my preference. But then I realized too, just like your videos, I started having some of my little viral video shorts get seen. I'm like, oh, there is this cohort, like, get outside of yourself, Aaron. There's this cohort of people who they like the visual. And then with your book now, you're tapping into this new demographic of folks who like to read and consume it that way. So it's amazing to see how you've sort of taken this adventure and then built this platform, but now you're starting to tap into these other areas to reach people, and they're consuming it in the way that they love consuming. That's a beautiful full circle moment. That's awesome. This book tour, by the way, where are some of the cities that you're going? I know between now and then returning to the road to Japan.
Well, they're all in the UK, so England, Wales, and Scotland.
So not in Cleveland, Ohio. Damn it.
Shame.
I know. We're in the middle of America. No, but it would be so at some point, maybe soon. I know you'll probably reach me before I attempt to reach you. But that's amazing.
When you were talking about storytelling, well, first of all, I think for my book, I think it really helped that I've created, you know, hundreds of videos, because even though it's a different media, I got a lot of practice with how to tell a story well. And it doesn't really, in that sense, matter if you do it only via audio or only via video or in writing. So that really helped me. But for my videos, like my storytelling that I do is I never use a voiceover. Okay, there's 2 instances where I made like a compilation video, but that's a different story. But my normal videos, I don't work with voiceover. So that means the story, I have to tell it in real time. As it's happening, I am narrating the story. And that makes it difficult. And I understand that's why a lot of people use voiceover, because you have to sometimes fill in the gaps, right? And that's why also sometimes I don't succeed perfectly. But it does keep me extremely focused all the time on storytelling, because I have to do it right there. I cannot fix any mistakes later, right? So that's how, when I'm traveling, I am always thinking about the story and always trying to, capture it as well as possible.
Now you got me fired up to ask you a question.
Okay, go ahead.
You mentioned earlier that, like, you said something, I'm paraphrasing. You said something like, I didn't realize how storytelling was such a, not important, but it was like such a thing. When you were younger, what kind of stories interested you? Or were you not a person that consumed media or stories or books? Or were you just like, you were too busy doing rather than, talk to me about that. There's no right answer.
I was too busy doing. And that's the whole, maybe also part of the reason why when I started with motorcycle adventure travel, I had no idea that it was already done before by many people who were already really famous at the time. I was like, never heard of them, never watched them, because I was just, busy figuring out myself. So, and even when I started, I was like, I'm not going to watch other people do stuff. I'd rather do it myself, So I was never really busy with it. Before I started my YouTube channel, I never watched YouTube. Nothing. Barely even knew it existed, And then as soon as I started myself, okay, you watch a bit more. But I was always more of just doing it myself, I think.
Was there a moment that you started going, oh, like, yes, you were doing sort of this documentary series, but when you started being sort of aware more deeply about projecting the narrative?
I think, when I thought, okay, maybe I should try YouTube to document travels, I spent like 1 or 2 weeks watching YouTube videos on how to do YouTube and how to make videos. And I watched Casey Neistat. Surely you know him. And I watched one of his videos about storytelling. And he said, every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it sounds super basic, but if you're actually aware of that and use it, it's very powerful. And because of that, I have done a few things right from the beginning. So I thought, okay, I'm going to start every video with Good Morning Internet. That's going to be my opening. And then I end every video with, that was it for today. I really hope you liked this video. If you did, please give me a big thumbs up, subscribe down below, and then I'll see you in the next video. I've said that for over 700 times. And it makes it really easy because I don't have to think about the beginning. I don't have to think about the end. It's already sorted, then you can focus on the middle part. And so that's kind of what I got from there. And then as I started releasing my first videos, you immediately get feedback from your audience, people were commenting. And that made me realize really quickly, like, okay, I need to work better on my storytelling because people, they get lost in part of the video, for example. Like this transition was weird. And they're like, huh? How did you get from here to here? So that came gradually. And then I started focusing on it more and more. And I think it's always the most important thing.
It's interesting too, because when you talk about the simplicity, that case you talked about that you're implementing, it's simplicity in the sense that why wouldn't I know that? But so many folks who aren't in the space, there's not an awareness for it. They know how they consume stories, but in terms of expressing it, I talk to companies, I go, you got a beginning, middle, and end. And for me, everyone approaches it differently. For me, the beginning's an opportunity to make a promise. And you can make a promise to your audience, not that you're going to guarantee them a happy ending, not that you're going to guarantee them that they're going to get everything that they want, but I'm going to make a promise to you here that we're going to go from here to here. And in between, I'm going to trust your intellect, you as an informed person to glean something from this. And then to your point, you have an end. What's been interesting for me, especially not in the YouTube space, but in the short form space, the promise is implicit in, in the autobiographical stories, 7 minutes. Every time it's 7 minutes, 7 approximately, right? So there's already implicit promise. And I think you have done by repeating that process and then opening up between between the beginning and the end, you've then just filled it up with the sense of adventure that you have, yourself, your own sort of charisma that you don't acknowledge. And that's fine, because that's what people with real charisma don't actually acknowledge they have it. If they say like, yes, I have it, you're probably on your border, you got something going on. So let's maybe end this with a couple of stories off the top of your head that you can think of. They don't have to be perfect.
In Saudi Arabia, you have this idea of Saudi Arabia as one big desert, right? Just sand forever. That's all you think about. And then I go there And that turns out to be false. There's mountains everywhere, and there's wadis, so dry riverbeds, and there's palm trees. But whatever stuck the most with me in Saudi Arabia is some areas, or a lot of the country, it is really desolate, right? It is huge, vast desert. And somehow, every time I thought I was on my own, very remote, some Saudi, pops up from behind a sand dune offering me water. That's I've never been offered water as many times in my life as in Saudi Arabia. And that's just what they do. They see you, they stop, and they're like, "Do you need anything? Do you need water? Do you have water?" And I was like, that was in terms of like kindness. I was like, where does this happen? In which country do random strangers pop up out of nowhere and go like, "Do you need something? Can I help you with something?" That was really, Saudi Arabia really stood out with that.
It hits me too, just the metaphor of water being given in the desert, right? Just the transformation of like a curator of something that is not present, but someone sort of stewarding this thing that we know when we think of desert, we ultimately think of water. And the fact that you're stopping along the way and people are offering you this thing, that's a beautiful reflection.
Yeah, and it also made me realize that, I didn't grow up in a desert. So you will, I think, unless you grew up there, you will always underestimate it. But the locals don't. So they know the dangers of it. And even though I've ridden through quite a lot of deserts now, but I'm convinced I will still underestimate it. If I really would get into trouble, I would run out of water really quickly. So yeah, knowing that they provide you with the thing that is the most important is, it was really amazing.
I have a tendency, I kind of have the sort of a romanticism behind storytelling. I am aware that that's my brand. And I don't discount realism. I just think in a world that is full of realism, I tell real stories, but I try to accentuate the hopeful moments and the moments that we can hang on to. So that's not it's selective, not in the sense that I'm discounting or ignoring, but it actually is finding, so to speak, the water in the desert, right? It actually is, it exists and that exists. So maybe there is something that tested you, or there is a moment where you said, okay, you learned something. Is there anything off the top of your head that our listeners may glean value from?
Yeah, I can really relate to that, because I also want to show the good side, right? I'm like, okay, we already see enough of the bad stuff. So I prefer to show the good side of people, the good side of a country. But at the same time, I have exactly the same kind of moral dilemma that I'm like, okay, but sometimes I see something or I see a story where I feel like, okay, this is not really pretty, but it needs to be told. And then suddenly I feel like I'm a very important journalist, or I feel like I have this, I have this journalistic duty or something. So I'm like, no, this should be told. And like one of those moments was in Nigeria, where I was pulled over by cops. This is the first and only time that I ever went viral. This has never happened before. So I get pulled over, and then these two cops are like, give me money, give me money. And I knew that my helmet camera was rolling, and they could see my helmet camera. I don't work with hidden cameras. They are clearly visible. And they were like 10 centimeters away from this camera shouting, give me money. So I knew like, oh, this will do well on YouTube. Because police and any, this type of behavior does really well on YouTube. And then I had the option, okay, am I going to put it in the video? Am I going to leave it out? Or am I going to put it in but blur out their faces? And it was such a moral dilemma that I was like, okay, but I'm not going to protect corruption, right? I find that morally wrong. So I'm not going to, protect them. They did this, this is their behavior, and they do it to the locals as well. It's not because I'm a foreigner. They do this every day to the locals. They're extorting money. So I put it in, and then it completely blew up. And already the next day, the Nigerian police force was tweeting that they were fired. And they were fired, but then publicly, and that was being filmed and also spread again. So that blew up again. And then suddenly I was getting death threats because 2 people lost their job because of me. And so many times I have thought about this, like, okay, would I have done the same if I knew the outcome? Because obviously I felt bad that two people lost their job. But at the same time, I was like, but you lost your job because of your corruption, because of what you are doing every single day to people. So, yeah, and that's like this moral dilemma that I'm like, I want to show the good, but I also want to show reality. But what if the consequences of that can turn out bad for people? I find this really difficult.
I did want to say there's something that really stands out to me here. So, uh, your content, as I've been following it, and then when we got a chance to book you on this show, or multiple shows you're going to go out to, I was thinking about a musician, Henry Rollins, and he's also a spoken word artist, and in the States, and Henry Rollins um, travels like wild. So he does similar to what I do, sort of spoken word and just a microphone and his stories. But as a musician and as a performer, he is an avid traveler all over the place. And the sentiment he talks about is very similar, or he shows it in a different lens, but is very similar to what you share with your audience, which is adventure with you and your story. So we have that story we get to hold on to, rooting for you, rooting for the motorcycles, and like, no, like when one, it's like we lose a family member when that, you know what I'm saying? Like, so you have all these layers that we're hooked onto. But the other thing that is the clearest for me, and it's actually it's a little bit emotional. I won't make it uncomfortable, but I would say that like in a world for people who don't travel, who are really searching for, to your point, grappling with what is this? How do I make sense of in a world of like information that is wild, that runs wild, and that oftentimes doesn't necessarily portray the full picture? I have to say,
Hmm.
what you are doing in the same way that Henry Rollins did is, I think you all represent we should be looking to and listening to your point of view, to your point, not as gospel, not as like, this is the truth. But when I'm looking for perspective, it's your channel or Henry Rollins or folks like that, that we should actually consider more so than headlines and things that are using to get clicks and stuff. And I say this because
Hmm.
you being in those spaces opens up an option to make a decision that's informed. And what you do by opening up that world, even in a world where we're trying to find meaning, truth, and even break stereotypes, you're not saying this is this or this isn't this, but you're showing a picture that informs us and allows us to create a better decision about what we think about the world. I know that's heavy. I really mean that. So
Hmm.
I think it really is, a service. You might just be still hijacking that bike from your brother and you're going, yeah, like you're right. By proxy and the way you've articulated narrative and the care you've taken with that, I have to tell you, it does create a better space for us to kind of understand the world. And so I wanted to thank you for that.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, no, that means a lot because that that's for a big part of what I obviously hope to achieve, and I'm like, not everybody wants to travel or can travel to some of these places, and then hopefully, yeah, I can give a little bit of an insight how it's like, and you know, in the end, it's only my experience, and whatever happened to me doesn't mean will happen
Right.
to everybody, and that's sometimes it makes me sad because, for example, my
Yeah.
motorbike got stolen in Iraq. And then suddenly I was getting messages of people like, oh, I think I'm going to avoid Iraq now because don't want my motorbike to be stolen. Whereas I know for a fact it's very rare to happen there, actually. It will much more likely will be
Mm.
stolen in London than in Iraq, But suddenly what happened to me is then kind of given like this whole country a bad name. So that always makes me a little sad. But yeah, at the same time, like this
Right.
is the reality. And a lot of the times, these are the exceptions. I think like usually I hope at least that I'll be able to show in one country that people consistently see, oh, the people are very friendly, or this always happens, so that they get, yeah, a view of how it's really like to travel around a
Well,
country
through
on a
that bike,
motorcycle.
through that lens on a motorbike, as you kind of traverse, you're really just showing the complexity of life, and that's life, right? Like whether I take 2 blocks to go to the convenience store, between now and there, I'm going to have some asshole that cuts out in front of me. I'm going to have some kind person that helps me, right? And if just in that small spectrum is really
Yeah.
what you're kind of reflecting, like, no, this is the world. And to your point, within that
Yeah.
complexity, a whole hell of a lot of good too. A whole hell of a lot of good.
Exactly.
So thank you so much. Thanks for talking story. Thanks for essentially being a therapist. I might have to send you a copay. In the States, we don't have the same kind of system that you guys do over there. It's very expensive to get healthcare here. So I will send me.
I'll send you an invoice.
Unpack a lot of trauma. Thank you. No, but sincerely, it was a really great time talking to you. I hope this was a good experience for you as well. And I can't wait to share this with our audience.
Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.